Testing. All right. Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear me, please. Testing, if you don't mind. Loud and clear? All right, awesome. All right, what do you guys want to look at? Just let me know in the chat and we can take a look. Hey Brenton, thanks for the love. What's up, Zachary? GME, oh, that's a good one. AMD, G's Life, okay. All right, for GME, so price is holding on to this 2-week LDPM level, which is pretty encouraging to see. It's also holding on to the weekly trigger. So in short, price is now sandwiched between the weekly trigger, the hourly and daily trigger, and between 2-week LDPM and then 4-hour, weekly, and daily LDPM. So any kind of move above or below will kind of shape up direction. But currently, it's hard to say that we can know where price is going. For me personally, before I get into GME calls again, I'm going to want to see sold calls come in. You can see earlier how GME actually rejected the 4-hour LDPM, turning it back bearish. My buddy Alan Mills turned me on to you. We were talking about you this morning, bought 100 GME today. Oh, that's interesting. Which videos did you check out? You said you love the videos. Which videos were those? As for AMD, so AMD is actually looking really bullish to me here. So the LDPMs are stacked bullishly. Lighter colors to darker colors is bullish. Darker color on top, lighter colors are on bottom are bearish, as demonstrated in this chart. And the hourly trigger also just broke above the daily trigger. So if you want to see my AMD projection, it actually looks like this. Let's zoom out a bit. Let's take this off. So I think AMD is setting up for a trade like this. Oh, okay. So we had the one, looks like this pullback could be called the 2. And then, there's a big level here, 116.88, and then there's another one at 117.22. But if price can get above here, then, pretty large move to the upside can easily happen. So I'm long AMD against this level, 113.22. As long as price remains above that, I'm long. And again, I also like the way LDPM looks, and I like the way the trigger cross looks. Can we check on Beyond? Yes, of course. Let's take a look. So Beyond, it's pretty tricky right here because price is at the weekly trigger. So, there's definitely going to be some sort of resistance here, but you guys are familiar with airplane setups and you know what happened here. Hourly trigger came down to the daily trigger, price broke through. That usually leads price to the next trigger. Now, if Beyond can get above its weekly trigger, then there's a huge air pocket to the monthly trigger at 43. We look at Carvana, and I tweeted about this when it originally happened, right here. It was a very, very, very similar situation. So check this out. Carvana got the hourly trigger crossing above the daily trigger, then finally rejected the weekly trigger at first, but then finally broke above, and then obviously exploded to the upside with the next trigger all the way up at 74. So yeah, this move is certainly possible over time. There's no way to tell how quickly it could happen, but it could definitely happen over time. So for beyond, it's pretty much the same situation here. If price can get above the weekly trigger and then get the lower time frame triggers like the hourly and the daily trigger above the weekly trigger, then this thing can move up all the way to $43. And so decent amount of risk reward here for this trade. But the weekly trigger, again, it's not an easy level to break. So I would expect at least some pinning here. Confirmation would be once the weekly trigger crosses above. Hood, we can take a look at. Hood looks very bullish. This was, given on Meme Stock Watch. Got the hourly trigger crossing above the weekly trigger. We got the daily trigger crossing above the weekly trigger. And there actually is no monthly trigger for Hood because it's a newer stock, but this is a very bullish trigger orientation. And I would expect price to continue climbing to the upside over the summer. What else do you guys want to take a look at? AMC. So AMC is just, pretty much stuck here. But as long as 412 holds as support, then I am expecting higher levels, 468, 512. If this gets lost, then the bullish view is no longer favored. We take a look at LDPM. So we're right now currently below daily 4-hour and 1-hour LDPM. Weekly above and monthly above that. So above 479, this thing can really, really, really move. We know we have the weekly trigger at 524, and then above that we have 677, and then the monthly trigger at 819. So currently I'm not exactly bullish on AMC, but again, if the hourly trigger can get above the daily trigger, that can move to the weekly trigger, and that could bring a really powerful move up to the monthly trigger above. I haven't really been watching Roku too closely, but it's building in this significant setup. So it does have the hourly trigger and the daily trigger above the weekly trigger with a huge air pocket up to the monthly trigger at $114. So at some point, I do expect this to be able to move up here. It's been proving very difficult to time. I will say that much. It's invalid if the hourly trigger and the daily trigger cross back below the weekly trigger, but as long as they're above, it's not too crazy to think that at some point this will make its way up here. How's the ETC GME overlay look? So that actually went so bad. I can't even tell you how bad that went, but it, right before the ETC overlay showed the huge move to the upside, that's right when GME tanked. So that was pretty frustrating. Fubo, we can take a look at. Here. Wow. So I was seconds away from buying Lucid calls over here this morning, but I slept on it. But we have been calling for price to move up to 830 for a while. So again, pretty simple, trigger cross, and then price moving up to the weekly trigger. Fubo, looking really good. Massive air pocket to 815. So over here, once the daily trigger crosses above the weekly trigger, that move can very well happen. Tilray, sure. So Tilray is currently below all its triggers. Here's the hourly, here's the daily, here's the weekly, and then way above is the monthly trigger. So, Tilray becomes very interesting once the hourly trigger crosses above the daily trigger, but until then, I'm not watching it too closely. Yeah, until then, I'm not watching it too closely. Also below some key LDPM levels. What else do you guys want to look at? This Google trade should be coming up soon, so just explain it quickly. So we're waiting for an hourly close above 121.68, and then I think this can fly up to 126.32. This is a trade I'm very excited for. There's also a lot of bullish positioning yesterday, so I think either next week or the week after that, finally get this hourly close above the level, and then explode to the upside. MSOS, sure. I don't think I heard of this one. Oh, so this looks really good. So this is a classic airplane setup where the hourly trigger comes down to the daily trigger, price breaks through both of them, and this could very well hit the weekly trigger above. Where's the monthly trigger? And then, if the hourly trigger and the daily trigger get above here, it can move up all the way to $17. Ape Daddy, good job, nice trade. So yeah, MSOS, I would expect it to at least reach the weekly trigger, and then depending on if it can get through or not, either the upside will be done here or it'll squeeze even higher. What else do you guys want to take a look at? WBA or MS. Coinbase. Coinbase was a really good one. Saw this move coming from a mile away, but unfortunately did not capitalize on it. Here's when we found it, coin. So this was, this would have been a life-changing move had I taken advantage of it, but I did not, unfortunately. Still keeps me up at night. But again, this is a simple case of, price breaking above the weekly trigger, hourly trigger crossing above the weekly trigger, daily trigger crossing above the weekly trigger, which means that price can very well move to the next trigger above, which is the monthly trigger up here, all the way at 140. So that could be quite possibly a very strong move. Okay, why did I sell my GME calls when I still have time till September? So I think that's a great question. So I trade with a very strict set of trading rules, and I didn't utilize them well for this GME trade. So I'll just go over with a little bit what happened. Here's where I bought the major bulk of my calls, but I also bought up here at 25, sold the 26s. Bought some 30s up here, sold the 31s as a hedge for this downside, and bought them back and added more here. When price came up here, I really thought we were going to the monthly trigger at least, because with airplane setups where the hourly trigger comes down to the daily trigger and then price breaks to both of them, almost always you move up to the monthly trigger. And so here, I didn't think it would be any different. When price fell short here, kind of added on the way up as well, because I really thought this was going to break above the monthly trigger. Of course, it fell short. Why it fell short, I'm still very confused myself. Like, this is statistically extremely improbable that price didn't hit the monthly trigger. So it's still very confusing for me. But my rule is that, I don't like to be long calls. I never am long calls when price is below the daily LDPM, unless, it's like moving up towards it, if there's like a strong buy signal from the lows. But otherwise than that, if I'm in a trade and then price breaks below the daily LDPM, which is this blue line, I'll always cut the trade. Just, that's how I'm going to stay safe in the long run. So when price lost the daily LDPM here, that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to save my cash and I will try again when things look better. So I sold, and thankfully, it looks like I made the right choice. But yeah, that was the biggest loss that I've taken as a trader in probably the past 2 years. This move was just makes no sense to me till now that price couldn't hit the monthly trigger. And I was ready to sell a good portion here. possibly break above and start a real bull run to the $35, $40 to $50 levels. But the fact that I fell short here is just so statistically unusual and improbable. So till this day, I don't really know what happened. Like, these airplane setups will almost always take you to the next trigger. You know, like Lucid wasn't an airplane setup. Where did we see one just before? Not sure. But also Riven, a good example of price breaking above its weekly trigger and exploding higher to the upside. Rivian, we called on meme stock watch at 14. Price broke above the daily trigger, and then the hourly trigger crossed bullish, and then price broke above the weekly trigger, and then the hourly trigger crossed. All of these are very bullish things that that took price higher. Very simple if using the system. Yeah, I could take a look at DWAC. So price rejected its weekly trigger here, came back down, bounced off the hourly trigger. It looks like it's headed back up here. Where's the monthly trigger on this thing? Oh, probably won't have one. Yeah, it doesn't have one. Again, very similar story. If price can get above the weekly trigger and get the hourly trigger to cross above, that would be a very good bullish trade. But for now, it seems, range bound in between the daily and the weekly trigger. Yeah, RAD. This looks pretty nice. Yeah, this looks pretty nice. So price is probably going to come up and hit the daily trigger here. And then if the hourly trigger can cross above the daily trigger, we can pretty much easily get a move all the way up here to the weekly trigger. So this definitely on watch if the hourly trigger can cross above. Looks like the market took a little bit of a pullback. All right. No problem, guys. Thanks for hopping on. Just wanted to take a little bit of questions. Maybe you guys had some good opportunities on some stocks for me to possibly trade. So just wanted to come on for a couple minutes, answer some questions. I didn't even eat yet today, so I'm probably going to go get lunch now. So probably market, if I had to guess, probably going to be a little flat-ish to the end of the week. But next week, I think these are really going to work. I really like this AMD trade a lot. At least up here to 117, as long as this level isn't lost. And then Google, I think is going to be a fantastic trade. So just waiting for price to get an hourly close above 121.69, and then I think price is going to be able to at least hit 126. And for Fubo, if the daily trigger can cross above the weekly trigger, then I'd be very, very interested in taking a position, as price can move all the way up to 815. So I have an alert set for that. We'll see if it happens or when it happens. But if that cross happens, I'm definitely gonna want to take a position. All right, guys, be in touch.